This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 42. We'll be talking about perhaps the very top trait of successful entrepreneurs, and that is resilience. Specifically, we'll be talking about how to build resilience in yourself so you can grow your business. We've got 5 ways to do it, and that's next on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
David, are you reading any good books lately?
No, but I just downloaded a couple of books on my Kindle. I'm going to start the reading process again. I've been working on your book, helping you with that.
That's true. You listen to a lot of books.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of books, right, but haven't really been reading for the last probably month or so.
What's new on your Kindle?
Well, new on the Kindle, I got a book called Simpler, Declutter Your Life and Focus on What's Most Important by Mike Burns. I also bought one about Jim Henson. People know him from the Muppets, called Make Art, Make Money. So I'm looking forward to digging into those.
Man, I could have written the declutter book. That's like my thing. You and I are like pretty much anti-clutter except for one
except for my office.
House. Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it. Yeah, but I think you're decluttered at heart. It's just not in effect yet.
Well, I'm a minimalist at heart, and I'm striving for that. That's why I have a book called Simpler.
I love stuff like that. I feel like that really helps people when they declutter their lives, like to become more successful. So I'm interested to see what becomes of that book.
I think about my life and how it's been. And as an entrepreneur, you have highs and lows. And there have been times when I've brought in a lot of money, and there have been times when I've brought in not so much. Going from extremes like that, you get really clear on what's important. It's easy, I think, when you come into a lot of money quickly. It's something for entrepreneurs to watch out for, to think that you can spend your way into happiness, and that's not necessarily the case. So if you're interested in the topic, this may be a good book. We'll report on that soon.
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast Freedom Fast Lane. You listened to that one, right?
I've heard it before, yes.
Okay. And he was just talking about how to make $1 million and how to keep it, saying a lot of people get into the money, start making 6 figures, 7 figures, but they lose it immediately. So I think keeping it is the key there.
Yeah. So what are you reading?
I'm reading an older book called The Little Red Book of Selling.
I've read it.
Yep.
Jeffrey
Gitomer. Yeah. And it's been good. It's just little tidbits. It's called 12.5 Principles of Sales Greatness, How to Make Sales Forever. And it's just been great to kind of catch up on some sales and marketing techniques and everything like that.
That's a great book for anybody interested in edge, pushing the edge, and also personality marketing. I don't remember the tips. All his books are like 12.5 tips, 13.5 tips. There's always a half tip in there. And I don't remember any of the tips, but what I do remember is the guy's attitude.
He does have quite an attitude in this book, but it's been interesting to read. And now that I'm writing my book, I don't just read books for the content. I read them to see, how does the author do it? What's his personality that he's bringing through? What's the format of the book? It's like absorbing a book on a whole new level than I ever have before.
And what's the book called? It's called The Red Book of Selling, right?
Little Red Book of Selling.
Right. Perfect for the Red Podcast.
Yeah, I bought it for $1.
Except Red here stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We are for authors, bloggers, publishers, writers, anybody with a message that needs to get out. We help you define your message. We help you expand your message, get it out to the people that want it, help you distribute it. Perhaps most importantly for entrepreneurs, we help you get paid for it so you can continue to do it.
And also the personal development aspect as well of what it takes to get to the top of your niche, to the top of your game. All of that is included in what we talk about on the Red Podcast.
So if you want more from us, redpodcast.com. is where to find us. We're also available on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast. And today we are talking about how to build resilience. Huge problem. I think it could be why most businesses fail, why most business owners end up going to get that day job again.
And this is something that Barbara Corcoran talks about, and she's on Shark Tank. And she said, I read an article about her where she said she chooses entrepreneurs to work with based on how resilient she thinks they are. Because it's a quality that if you are going to be successful, you need to have resilience. And something that Winston Churchill said was, success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. That can also be viewed as resilience, as picking yourself up one time after another. That's all it is to be an entrepreneur.
You know, coming from my work in the music business, the top musicians that I've ever met, I can't think of one that was just naturally talented and it was easy for him. Now, there are certainly some talented people within the business. Some of them have maybe greater gifts at the beginning than others, but the ones that we hear about, it's all resilience. It's all sitting there practicing with that slow, steady increase in ability. And that's how careers are born as well.
Yeah. And I think of resilience as when you fail, you get back up. That's kind of when you get rejected, you get back up again. That's the trait that you have to have if you want to make it any distance with your business, because we all get rejected. We all fail. Those are givens. Those are going to happen. And the successful people get through it. It might take you, something that's happened with me that I've noticed over the years of being an entrepreneur is something bad would happen and it would take me months to get over it and to have that resilience and get back on the wagon or get back on the horse, if you will. And then that same thing might happen again, and it would take me a couple weeks, and then it would take me a couple days. And now things that used to bother me and take me a while to get back on the horse now takes me a couple hours maybe to get back on the horse. So you can cultivate resilience, and you should be.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I think the first step for somebody who's looking to cultivate resilience, it's a solid support network. Because no matter how good you are, no matter how successful you are, there are going to become those times when it can't just be all you, when you've got to rely on somebody else. You and I do this for each other, Laurel. Fortunately, we're never both down at the same time, it seems.
Thank God. I think I was telling my mom today, we had lunch and we were talking about our upcoming wedding. And I was saying, David has been so supportive. I think I've had at least one breakdown about my book per month since I started. Because that's the nature of doing difficult work like this, and to have a support system like you and to have you up when I'm down and vice versa, it's made the difference for me in getting out of my comfort zone and writing this book.
And your support network, it doesn't have to necessarily be family. It could be a mastermind group. It could be a church group. It could be some sort of religious or spiritual organization. It could be a professional organization where you meet other people that are in the same situations that you're in. It doesn't necessarily have to be family. I have to say, though, I don't know if you can really be successful without having the support of your family. You don't want to live with a bunch of naysayers, people that are always going to be pulling you down when you're trying to climb up or pushing you down when you're already down.
I like to say that to sail a ship, you need a crew. And you might be the captain at the helm, but you can't sail the ship all by yourself. And when you go through a storm, when you have a failure, when something is going bad, you need a crew on deck, all hands on deck, to be able to sail that ship through the storm. So having a solid support network is going to be number one if you want to have that resilience and you want to get through the tough times.
And when it comes to failure, I think it's important that you find positive meaning in failure. I talked about this on the last episode of Red Podcast, which is redpodcast.com/41 if you're interested in listening to that. But that's how Thomas Edison, when he was trying to find the light bulb, invent the light bulb, he says, I didn't have 10,000 failures. I just know 10,000 ways that won't work. And I think about that when I run into a failure. It's the thing that gets you closer to that next success. A lot of people think about that when they're in sales. They say that no just gets me closer to the next yes. And that's a great way to think about failure, I think.
I love that. Did Thomas Edison try 10,000 ways or 1,000 ways? That's what I want to know.
10,000 ways.
Did he try 10,000 ways?
10,000 ways, yeah.
Wow, very impressive for him.
Now, I've never verified that. I wasn't there. And, sometimes history gets a little convoluted. It's just one man's opinion, and then we all seem to add on to it. You've ever heard those war stories about like the Red Baron who shot down hundreds of planes?
I think you do have to find the positive in failure and that you have to learn the lessons. Because I found in my life, if I don't learn the lessons that I need to learn from a failure, that failure is going to happen over and over and over again until I do learn from it.
Yeah, and not only will it happen over and over again, it just gets more and more intense.
Exactly. It's kind of, we always go back to dating because I think dating is such a good analogy for business. It's like if you date the wrong person and you don't learn the lessons when you break up with them and you just say, oh, it was them and their bad qualities were the reason we broke up. And then you start dating someone who's pretty much the exact same and you keep going through this pattern. You might see your friends do it if you haven't noticed that you do it. And until you learn the lesson of that's not the right person for you and you got to turn inward and look at yourself, you are going to date that same person basically until the end of time. So you got to learn the lessons.
I think it's extremely important that if you're an entrepreneur, you have the ability to make good decisions. And not only that, but stick with those decisions. We see a lot of people, they email us, they contact us, we sometimes work with them. They just don't make good decisions. And part of that is not finding the positive meaning in failure, just kind of accepting it, messing things up, and then continuing to do the same thing, hoping for different results. Just in general, having the ability to make good decisions, I think is one of those things that's a top trait in successful entrepreneurs. And once you get in the habit of making good decisions, if you start small and you work yourself up, that's one of the things that I think can help you build resilience.
And the ability to follow your gut instinct, I think, is really important because when you're faced with a decision, it can be hard to know in the beginning whether this is a good decision. Should I start this specific business idea or should I launch this business? Should I write this book? Should I do this program? It's hard to know in the very beginning if it will work out. But I think as an entrepreneur, if you learn to follow your gut instinct and trust yourself to make the right decision, then you're going to be on a much better path. And if a failure comes up along the way, if something happens along the way, you have that resilience because you had that gut feeling and you're able to stick with that decision until you do get the result that you want.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that because I think when it comes to resilience, maybe sometimes people are too resilient when they don't listen to their guts. And when they continue to make those bad decisions after bad decisions, even when their gut is telling them not to. Do you have any examples of a bad decision that you made and maybe something that you should have quit a long time before you did?
I think for me, when I was a health coach and I had my health coaching practice here in Nashville, it wasn't necessarily a bad decision. It was a good decision to go into coaching, but I had a gut feeling that this wasn't what I was meant to do. I was meant to do something different. I was meant to do something bigger. And I kind of ignored it for a while because I had a good practice going on and I didn't want to shift gears. It was scary to shift gears. Basically, I was going to have to let go of something that was working okay for me and jump into something else, and it may or may not work. And that was business coaching for me and starting my website, Go Fire Yourself. But I eventually had to follow that gut instinct. And it's scary when that comes up because you don't know if you're making the right decision. But if you say, okay, this gut instinct is telling me, I'm meant to do something else and it feels right to go down this path, you got to go with it.
Yeah, you never really know. Because there's always that flip side of the coin. You never will. I think the only thing that can maybe make your decisions better is having made a few wrong decisions and then comparing them to the few right decisions that you do make. I had an employee one time. This is somebody that I was hiring. I guess she wasn't really an employee. She was a contractor. And we started getting tax bills from the state of North Carolina, which is where she was based. And people wanted to put, I guess they would call it a lien on her paycheck or garnishment, garnish her wages because she hadn't paid her taxes. And that really wasn't my problem as far as I was concerned. I was going to give her